Hello and welcome to the Wildcard Rewind podcast. The 2023 season is officially over, and what a season it was. Loved watching all of it. But as we start to look forward to 2024, I think there's some really valuable lessons for us to learn from 2023. So this week, we're going to start reviewing some of our positions. Today, it's the quarterbacks. So let's get straight to it.
I just want to rewind to when we were young and hard. Back to all those good times. Take me back to the start.
Well, here we are. The 2024 season, I guess, is officially started, right? We've turned the page on 2023. And it's kind of a bit sad to not be talking about a game this week, but hey, here we are. As usual, I'm joined by one of our co-hosts with a best two tonight. Paul, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing so good. It's been a bit of a random day. My came home from picking the kids up at school, and my neighbour's car was on fire just at the end of my drive. So it's all been a bit hectic and a bit random. But it's Monday night. I'm on a podcast, and we've got an amazing guest who's got cheese on his head.
That sounds very dramatic, Paul, as usual. Yeah, and of course, with the off-season brings guests, and we have a fantastic guest this week. We had so much fun when he came on last off-season. It kind of feels fitting to have him as our first guest, of this off-season. So, Liam, welcome at the FSA Tweets on X. Super excited to have you back. How are you doing?
Thanks, Hannah. It's brilliant to be back. I mean, you're making me blush. Had the most fun with me on the first guest back. Whoa. And Paul, the hat's back just for you. You know it's there.
I love it.
It's just for you, mate.
I love it. I want to see if you can last the whole show with it on.
I'll do it just for you.
I have a headache now, and it would be all your fault, Paul.
Well,
So, before we kind of get into our proper QB review, obviously every week we have the big news. To be honest, I don't think there's like loads this week, but I did want to just mention, after basically almost winning the Super Bowl, only losing with like 7 seconds left in overtime, the 49ers have decided that Steve Wilkes, their defensive coordinator, was just not gelling with them, I suppose, and they've parted ways with him. Are you surprised at all, either of you, or kind of was this expected? Liam, I'll go to you first.
No, I was quite surprised by this news. It just feels like a scapegoat move, if anything. I don't really think that San Francisco did enough to win equally. Their defense didn't show up, but neither did their offense. It feels like it was a full team, not meltdown, but a full team effort that didn't quite get them over the hump. And for them to fire just the DC seems a bit harsh. So hopefully Steve will sort of find somewhere else and it doesn't hinder him. But yeah, it doesn't feel like it's just the DC's fault.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's weird to me because, they were the number one seed. They made it all the way to the Super Bowl, and they lost the game in the last 7 seconds. Now, whether you could look into it and go, yeah, it was a fault on this and a fault on that. Like you said, Liam, it wasn't quite the defense's fault. It wasn't the offense's fault or anything like this. You can say all that. They literally lost with 7 seconds. To me, you've got all the right pieces. It just didn't go your way on that night. So why fire somebody? I understand if you're, you finished the season and they were, 15. And yeah, that's when you're looking at firing people. But not a team that loses in the last 7 seconds of overtime in the Super Bowl. That to me is you want to keep all your guys together because they've done what they needed to do to get you there. You just fell at that last hurdle, I didn't think anyone should have been fired from or got rid of from the 49ers team. So it was a massive shock to me.
Yeah, I mean, I do know they were a bit up and down, that defense, over the course of the season, obviously with the players that they have. I think they expected to be kind of top level, and I think there were certain games when they weren't particularly great. And to be honest, like the first few games in the playoffs, they weren't fantastic. So I just think Shanahan was a bit like, meh, I don't think Wilkes is the guy, like, moving forward. I want to turn the page and go with someone else. I know we're talking about QBs and we'll go to them, I mean, in a moment, but I just want to actually talk about a wide receiver super quickly. What do you think the 49ers are going to do with Brandon Ayuk? Do you think they're just going to give him an extension and keep him? Or do you think there's a chance he goes anywhere? And would you like to see him somewhere? And if so, where?
Liam,
It's a tough one.
this is going to you because I don't want to answer this. In case you can answer it.
This is a tough one. It depends what cap space they've got, but I'd kind of expect them to keep him. He fits that offense. He does the role they want him to do and brings something to that offense that they don't have the other roles for. So if you take Debo's not that type of deep threat kind of guy. You've got Kittle, there's that, again, yak monster that they don't, unless you really want to try and shoehorn Juwan Jennings and other wide receivers you probably never heard of, or you might hear once a game. Then I think that you really need to just keep Ayuk around. Alternatively, they could look to the draft, potentially. I think that feels like a last resort kind of option where they don't sign Ayuk to a long-term deal, and they need something there.
Go on, Paul.
No, I was going to say, Hannah, if you speak now, I don't have to answer this one, and I can avoid it.
I was just, I'm wondering whether he's kind of a little bit like fed up because he is like a small piece of this offense. You know, this is a very kind of spread offense, really, isn't it? You know, CMC, Debo, and Ayuk will all kind of get their turns on different games. But I think he believes that he is a number one wide receiver. And I wonder whether he's kind of getting a little bit kind of angsty. He wants to go out and show that he is a wide receiver one. And I think he has got the talent to be one, but he's not going to take over this offense, is he? Like, this is not how the 49ers offense goes. And I just wonder whether if he kind of, causes enough friction, whether they say, oh, this is just too much effort, we'll, trade him or whatever. And then we'll draft someone in this draft and go again. But I don't know. That's just me kind of musing things.
Yeah, and I think
looking at his contract, sorry, Paul, looking at his contract, he's got a 5th-year option already done, so he's going to be there this year, unless, as you said, they trade him.
I was going to say, I'm sure Lewis said last week the 49ers are like the second worst with cap space as well. So I may be wrong with that. I'm sure he said it last week, but like, surely with all them players on that team, I don't think he's really one of the people that are in a position to demand much money, because I think there's a lot of people that they'd rather pay over him, and I think he could price himself out of the 49ers, if I'm right. Like, I know you said they've got the 5th-year option, but if he does think he's this number one wide receiver and he does demand this high paid contract, it could be a position where the 49ers go, we're not paying you that, goodbye, see you later. And then he could end up, do you know what? I'm going to say it. I would quite like to see him where he could actually be a number one wide receiver, and that's the Carolina Panthers.
I knew you were going to say that.
Why do you think I was going to say that?
Because every time a wide receiver is like available, it's the Carolina Panthers because they haven't got any wide receivers.
Yeah, they got none. Oh, they got Adam Thielen.
I think that would be a rubbish. I guess it depends what you think of Bryce Young, right? But he makes me nervous, and I think potentially you're wasting Ayuk there. I'd want him somewhere else where I knew that at least, I'd feel a bit more confident about the quarterback. Do you know what? Now you're probably going to laugh at me because
I want him at Cincinnati.
Oh, hell no. We've got a wide receiver one, thank you. I prefer Jamar Chase, thanks. I was going to say the Bears, but obviously they've got DJ Moore now, so they probably won't want him. But I think that would be quite a fun, like DJ Moore and Brandon Ayuk could be quite fun, wouldn't it? But they won't.
End up with what, Fields or Caleb Williams?
Well, I think it'd have to be Caleb Williams, right? Although, to be fair, Fields did all right with Moore this year, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah, they're not going to keep him, though, are they? Paul, what about your Arizona Cardinals? That would be fun. Him and Kyler, don't you think?
Well, if he can play behind Marvin Harris
Marvin
Jr.,
Harrison,
yeah.
I knew you were going to say that. What's going to happen when Marvin Harrison Jr. goes at pick 3, Paul? Are you going to have a breakdown?
I'm going to turn the draft off and go to bed.
Well,
please stream it.
To be fair, I don't know if I will be watching it live this year, but we do normally do like one of the, what do they call it on X, the fantasy space thing, and anyone was welcome to join, and there was quite a few of us in there last year. You were there, weren't you, Liam?
Yeah, I've been there for the past few years.
Yeah.
Me, you,
Matt,
Kev, Rich at points, and
George.
Stuff like that. So
yeah, there's quite a few of us there. So yeah,
Hannah, you're more than welcome.
You're just hear me leave the group really quickly.
I'm definitely going to tune in live. I was going to say, to see Paul start crying when Marvin Harrison Jr. is already gone. I think I'm definitely going to stay until pick 4. That's for sure.
I'm glad my misery brings you joy, Hannah.
Well, something has to, hasn't it, Paul? So, shall we get down to serious business? Let's talk 2023 quarterback position at fantasy. Another season with lots of QB injuries. Boo. So, here's notable QBs that we lost for the season at some point during the season. So, we've got Aaron Rodgers after 4 snaps with his Achilles, Kirk Cousins with his Achilles, Anthony Richardson with his shoulder, Deshaun Watson, boo, with his shoulder, Joe Burrow with his wrist, that's a massive boo, Daniel Jones with an ACL, and Justin Herbert with his finger. So these are just ones that went, with season enders. There are also multiple injuries, intermittently throughout the season. And looking back at it, actually injuries have been quite a theme for the position over the past 2 years. So in 2023, we had 66 different quarterbacks that recorded a start. And then actually that was even more in 2022 with 68 different quarterbacks recording a start. So I kind of want to dig into this a little bit, because obviously Superflex leagues are becoming increasingly popular now. And I think, to be honest, probably the most of the leagues that we play in are probably Superflex. And obviously this brings the QB position into a bit more focus and to be a bit more relevant. So what I kind of want to know from you guys is, have the injuries over the past few years altered your draft strategy in any way for the position? And kind of how are you planning to attack it in 2024, Liam?
I mean, it really depends on the format that you're playing in, so whether it's Dynasty or a redraft. So if it's Dynasty, then I'm still taking the 2 early long-term starters where I can, and then probably looking to fill out a 3rd and 4th of a QB 3 and 4 where they're a starter but maybe got some upside. I don't want to bring up Desmond Ridder because he didn't work out, but that kind of level of QB 3 and 4, and try and have 4 starting QBs in the first year. But as soon as you go into redraft, I'm probably taking a really good QB 1 and then waiting on value at QB 2 and just seeing what comes out, like a Jared Goff or a Kirk Cousins that have been quite good in terms of point scoring. I know that Kirk's now got a couple of question marks position for team where he's going to end up in the offseason, as well as his injury. But those type of quarterbacks where you don't ever see them go in the top 12, but they always produce that or can produce that top 12. Or you go for the high upside where, when we think back to this year, you've got Brock Purdy, you've got Jordan Love, those type of high upside guys where you potentially are booming because you've been able to switch out the draft values and get a positional player higher up.
What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, so I'm very similar to Liam here. I think if you're playing Dynasty, I think in Dynasty try and play that long game, don't you? So you want your good, secure quarterbacks. I think I very much like to every dynasty draft I'm in walk away with one of them tier 1 QBs. Your Josh Allen's, your Pat Mahomes, your Jalen Hurts, your Lamar Jackson, that sort of caliber player. You want one of them, and you do want potentially another top 12 QB if you can. You're talking somebody like Trevor Lawrence, Dak Prescott. If you can get somebody like that, or Kyler Murray, that type of player. If you can walk away with 2 of them players, you're always going to be happy. And then you sort of, you wait a few more rounds then, and like Liam said, you sort of wait for that value to drop your way. Now redraft, I think I'm a bit different. Redraft, I'm quite happy to not go for one of them tier 1 QBs. I feel like they're quite a high price, and from what we've seen this year, somebody like Pat Mahomes didn't pay back that value. I think he finished looking at things. I think he finished QB8, but to get Pat Mahomes, you had to take him within sort of like the first 3 picks. So I don't want that. I'd rather take a different player like a Justin Jefferson or a Christian McCaffrey or somebody like that, that I know is going to finish at number 1 at that position. And then maybe sort of like round 2, that's when you look at, your back end of your QB1s, your sort of like your Kyler Murrays, your Anthony Richardsons, them sort of upside plays. But then I want to be ahead of the pack and with my QB2. So that's something that I have learned this year, that QB2s are really, really valuable. And I think players like Brock Purdy, Jordan Love, Jared Goff, all of these players that we're seeing as these sort of QB2s. I know Kirk Cousins was always somebody that everyone always was like, I want him to be my QB2 in any team, because of he's consistent and he always does it. And I know this year he's had his injury, and next year, but like, to me, I think that person now, the person I'm going to be targeting quite a lot this year, is going to be Jared Goff. I think he's somebody that people are not going to take as a QB1, but I want to be ahead of the pack taking him as my QB2. So if I could walk out of a draft and I've got somebody like, I don't know, say for example, in a redraft now, Christian McCaffrey in the first round, and then I can pick up somebody like, I know I'm a homer, but Kyler Murray in the second round. And then, when we're sort of getting to like that 4th or 5th round, if I could be the guy that takes Jared Goff, I'm leaving that draft going, give me the trophy, baby. Okay. And so to me, I think redraft, I want to be ahead of the pack when it comes to taking my QB2. I want to be the guy that's got the best player at the QB2 position.
So this is actually a really interesting discussion.
Because you completely agree with me. Because you agree with me.
Nah. No, the thing is, so I was actually listening to a pod the other day. This was actually dynasty based. So let's start from the dynasty side. So these guys were saying that, typically now people have stopped looking at dynasty in these kind of long blocks. So like 5-10 years, they're looking at these short kind of 2-year, blocks, and then you're kind of refreshing each time. So really it's becoming more and more like a redraft, if you know what I mean, in terms of how people are thinking about it. Obviously, I know you don't redraft teams each year, but in terms of like longevity of players, like I'm not drafting someone because they're safe and they're going to be playing for 10 years. I'm starting to look for upside. So my question is, do you, and are you still wanting to take a quarterback in round 2? So we're looking at quarterbacks like Tua, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Kyler, Jordan Love, having taken a QB potentially in round 1, or, are you willing to wait a little bit more and pick a top potentially wide receiver? So around there, you could get Amon-Ra St. Brown. You could get Garrett Wilson, AJ Brown, Puka, all of these kind of guys that, are going to give you good, like long value at the wide receiver position, which I think now is probably, one of the cornerstones of a dynasty team now, really, isn't it? Like no one really cares about the running back position anymore. Or are you willing to wait longer and go for someone like, if you wait longer and you take a wide receiver, then you're really looking at your Kirk Cousinses or your Matthew Staffords, your Baker Mayfields. Like, there's kind of less security around them, but potentially you've got the upside of them. So Jared Goff's in there as well. So in 1 and 2 years, you're going to have potentially that upside of a QB2, maybe even a low-end QB1. But you've also got your top-end dynasty wide receiver. So actually, you've probably got potentially the best of both worlds in that way, because you've got potentially an upside QB for a couple of years plus a high-end wide receiver. Whereas if you've taken a QB rounds 1 and 2, and let's say you're going round 2, okay, I'm going to go Trevor Lawrence because I know that T-Law's got a job for 10 years and he can sit on my roster for 10 years and not have to worry about him. But having had him for 3 seasons, I would say he does have a bit of a questionable upside at this point. He might, progress, but he might not. Where do you sit there? Do you still want to draft the second QB early, like you've kind of both mentioned, or do you think maybe we could wait a bit and get that top end wide receiver as well? Like, where do you sit on this? Do you agree with my argument, or do you think that's stupid?
Paul's smiling away, so I really need to hear what Paul's got to say.
Paul just wants Tyler in the second round, right?
No. I just loved Liam's face when you said that Trevor Lawrence has got he's a QB for 10 years, and you just sort of went, I don't know if he is.
No, maybe not. But I mean, we know for now that he's got job security, right? Whereas, someone like Stafford could retire at any moment. Baker Mayfield could stay with the, Tampa Bay, could disappear.
So, okay, right. I'll go with my answer. Sorry, Liam. I'll go with my answer here. Now, I don't want to sound like that. This is an easy cop out or anything like that. But
here we go. He's going to cop out.
Yeah. So you kind of have to play the board, okay? You kind of have to play the board, and if we've seen draft strategies change so many times I've been playing fantasy football now for 8 years, and I've seen it change. I remember you were taking running backs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You know what I mean? Because the running back position was just so valuable, and everyone, and then it was QB, and I think a lot of people now will be going down the route which you mentioned. Do you walk out of there knowing that you could get Jamar Chase in the first, you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown in the second, and you haven't even reached for a QB yet, but then you take, I don't know, say a Matthew Stafford, and you take a Baker Mayfield, and you hope that works out. And a lot of people are going down this route of building a dynasty team around a wide receiver core now, and everyone wants that solid, amazing wide receiver core. The 3 of us are in a league together where we're doing a dispersal draft now, the Hatchet Run League. Now, I'm not going to brag, okay, but I have walked out of that with Jamar Chase and AJ Brown, and I've also picked up Matt Stafford and Aaron Rodgers. So yeah, my QBs are got big question marks over the head over the next sort of couple of seasons, but my wide receiver core is very, very solid. I've got a great foundation. But I did that because everyone else around me was going for all the QBs and stuff like that. So it was like, well, everyone's going for the QBs. I'll take the wide receivers. Now, if I get in a dynasty draft and people are going, oh, I'm going to go for the wide receivers, well, if the QB value is going to fall for me, I'm going to take the QB value. So I do feel like my answer is a bit of a cop-out answer. But I just think I like to play the board. And if I play with smart people, then I have to try and be doing something different,
Unfortunately, it is a cop-out answer, but it's the exact same as mine. That there's a lot that goes into it, and even though, yes, I'd love to be able to say yes, take this. But so it comes down to 2 things: 1, the board, which you've already mentioned, but 2, your preferred play style in Dynasty, especially in a starter. You either go into a Dynasty startup thinking, okay, I'm building a team for, say, the next 3-4 years. I'm not expecting to compete immediately, but in the next 2 years, I want to be up there in the playoffs and then eventually pushing for that title. Or you go into it thinking, okay, I'm going to win now and go down the route that Paul's mentioned. You have a few wide receivers that can keep you relevant, and then you take a few quarterbacks that are questionable, but will still give you points, and try and build out a team that is going to win near enough immediately. with the view of having some cornerstone points that you can then rebuild around in a few years' time. I personally prefer to play I will build a team that looks good relatively soon, so in say 3 years, but has the upside to go now, and push all the chips in, trade away all my picks. Equally, I can sell pieces and get rid. So when I do that, I tend to go QBs really early, as in looking at this year's draft, you are probably getting 10 or so QBs in the first 12 picks, because there are just so many good ones that I feel like there's going to be a rush to get those top picks. If we come back to your example, Hannah, where we're on about Amon Ross and Brown, it really depends on who is there. Again, cop out, but it really depends on who is there at that pick. Because if it's Amon Ross and Brown, and then you can get Goff in the third or the fourth, maybe even later than that, then that's a decent stack that you can go and get and still have QBs for future years. Yes, Goff has a few questions contract wise, whether he's going to stay at say at Detroit over the next few years and whatnot. But for this year, that's a good win now roster. But things can change really quickly with the NFL. Like, no one really saw Tyreek Hill leaving Kansas City, and then he got traded to Miami within the offseason, where everyone was like, oh, maybe something happens, and then all of a sudden he's gone. So you can try and build a team for the future, but you don't really know what's coming. We're going to see some trades this year. It's been ramping up for the past few years, where it started really quietly, say 5 years ago, maybe a few trades here or there, and then it started to get bigger and bigger. And then the Deshaun Watson thing happened. Don't like talking about him, but you've got that, and then you've got the Tyreek situation as well, where he got traded away, and there's a few big trades, and I feel like there's going to be even more this year, especially where Justin Field goes, where Kyler Murray potentially. All of these rumors are popping up, and not everything comes true, but I feel like personally I'm going top QB early, and then if I can get Jordan Love, someone else that's young with high upside, I mean that's homer pick, as you can see on my head, but someone along those lines, Brock Purdy even to an extent, those type of young quarterbacks with high upside that have kind of shown us something already, I can get one of those on the return, then I'm laughing. And then I'll try and pick up wide receivers later on. Try and do something slightly different rather than following the norm and just trying to scrape the barrel for all of that wide receiver talent.
Yeah, I mean, I do get what you're both saying, and like you say, like every draft is different. And I also think sometimes people go in and say, "Oh, today I'm going to get 2 QBs in the first 2 rounds," and they'll stick to that, whether that's the value or not. They're like, "I'm going to go in, and that's my plan." Whereas I think we all agree that being flexible is one of the main kind of advantages that you can have in drafts, and like you say, maybe, as everyone says, zigging when others are zagging kind of thing, taking the value, if everyone's going QB, taking the value at wide receiver, or if people are like, no, I'm going to wait, then maybe, picking up Kyler Murray in the second or whatever you want to do, Paul, maybe you can go that way. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying, and I understand that each situation is different. But sometimes I think people get too kind of, it's a super flex league, I must get these QBs, nailed, and I must get them in now, and then I'll just deal with everything else afterwards. And then they get, I don't know, someone in the first, Dak Prescott, I don't know, I'm making it up, and then they get someone else in the second, Tua, and then Tua leaves Miami because they don't want to pay him. And he ends up being rubbish. And then Dak gets paid, but I don't know, he gets injured. I don't know, I'm making it up. And then, you're in a bit of trouble because you actually, where are your cornerstone pieces now? That kind of
That
thing.
could happen with wide receivers. That's the thing. It happens everywhere, and I think that's what people tend to forget.
I mean,
Not saying you specifically. But...
No, I totally get what you're saying, Liam, but I think, ultimately there's like one quarterback, isn't there, for every team, whereas wide receivers, there's going to be 2 to 3 on the field at each time. So yes, Amon-Ra St. Brown may have an injury, and yes, that will have an issue, but let's say he gets traded to a team, he's still probably going to be on the field a lot of the time because they've traded for him for a reason. We know that he's good. Whereas, like Tua, I would be worried that if he went to another team, they're probably not going to give him a lot of time and then they'll move on. Do you know what I mean? Like, we already know that these wide receivers are good, and I think wherever they go, they're going to be good. They're going to command targets in some respect. So I would just feel more confident in some of these, CD, Jamar, Justin Jefferson, whatever, than some of maybe the late end round 1, early round 2, late round 2 quarterbacks, is really all I'm saying. But of course, everyone has to make their own decisions and opinions. That's just kind of something that I've been thinking about.
It sounds like you could have a lot of Jamar Chase and Kyler Murray this year, Hannah, if I'm honest.
Well, actually,
and I think that's very wise of you.
Fair play, Jim.
Very wise.
Is that because you're going to have lots of them and you think that's a good idea?
Oh no, I'm not drafting Kyler Murray.
Rubbish! Don't believe you. Lies.
I've got too much of him.
Okay,
I'm messaging you after this so I can get a trade for Kyler because I've got him in the Hatchetman League. So I'll be on to you. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, there you are, Paul.
Let me do the dispersal draft first. Then we get through that. So message me in July.
6 months.
You wait until after the draft. So let's get back. Obviously, we've talked a little bit about strategy on these injured QBs. Let's get back to kind of these ones that were injured in 2023. So which of them do you think will most likely finish in the top 12 in 2024?
So I'm looking. The easy answer is obviously Burrow, Herbert, and those QBs are very much obviously just almost pinned into just jumping back into the top 12. That's how the community sees them. I think Anthony Richardson is probably the one that I like to surprise in quotation marks because he came in strong, obviously showed us a lot, and then got injured. So surprise with a little bit of an asterisk next to it because it's not really a surprise to an extent. But then I've kind of given this away a little bit earlier, but Kirk Cousins is the one that I'm really interested to see where he lands because depending on landing spot, I think he could either just come back in and be another top 12 QB as he's been for most of his career, or equally he could just fade into the abyss and we'll never really see him after this year. So it'll be interesting to see where that happens, but I think A-Rich is a safe option. I'll go with Kirk as the outside surprise.
So where do you think Kirk's going to land, Liam?
Honestly, I think the Vikings will have him back. I don't think they've got the resources to try and bring in someone new or try and draft someone new. So I think they'll try and get him back. But honestly, I have no idea who wants to take a chance on a 35-year-old quarterback that's going through an Achilles tear. Not really many places other than where he's already been. And Vikings already have Justin Jefferson that he's got the rapport with and everyone else. So I feel like they're just going to run it back.
I think it's another interesting discussion because I actually think the quality of the QB free agents this off-season, he's probably pre-injury, he probably is at the top. And the question is, will people be willing to overlook the injury and say, come because we're so desperate for a quarterback, and therefore will quite happily outbid the Vikings? Or are they going to be a bit more like, the injury, I feel a bit uncertain, and they'll just let him go back to the Vikings? And I'm not sure which side is going to outland. I do wonder whether he is more motivated to stay in Minnesota because his family's settled. I think he's happy there. So he may well, obviously we know his history of wanting fully guaranteed contracts, blah, blah, blah. I wonder whether actually for this one he does settle, and doesn't take quite as much as he may necessarily have otherwise got to stay where he was.
Potentially. And the other thing as well is Justin Fields is on the market. So even though, yes, Kirk Cousins is going to be the top free agent, you've still got Justin Fields that is on the block. You've got other quarterbacks around the league that may be available and that kind of flashed or impressed at points during the year. So it'll be interesting to see because I reckon there'll be a few QB trades flying around as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting off-season, isn't it? Paul, anybody else you think you'd want to put in the top 12 from these injured guys, or do you agree with Liam?
So I'm going to throw Aaron Rodgers in there. I think Aaron Rodgers could be my my bet as somebody that could sneak in the top 12. I think coming into the season in the Jets, like, you know, everyone was excited about Garrett Wilson and what he could do with Aaron Rodgers throwing in the ball. And we know what Aaron Rodgers can do with the ball and a good wide receiver. We've seen it many years. And I just think if he can, if they can sort out that O line and he can start throwing that ball about, he could be somebody that could quite easily sneak into that top 12. So, you know, I've got all the names that have been mentioned: Richardson, Burrow, Herbert. I think they're three that you could basically put in the top 12 straight away. But I think with the right season, I think Aaron Rodgers could be somebody that could sneak into that top 12. You know, I don't think he's going to go far into that top 12, but he's somebody that I could see sneaking in.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. My question with him would be, can the O-line not be a total sieve and give him a chance to throw the ball?
As I said, as long as they can protect him, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
He's fine.
So shall we have a look at the actual top 12 QBs from the 2023 fantasy season? So I'm going to start with total points. So coming in at number uno, Josh Allen with 392.6 points. Number dos, 2, Jalen Hurts, 356.8 points. In third position, taking the bronze medal, Dak Prescott, 342.8 points. In fourth position, which kind of seems surprising for the MVP, but Lamar Jackson is only in fourth with 331.2 points. In fifth position, you'll be enjoying this, Liam, Jordan Love, 319.1 points. Sixth, Brock Purdy, 295.6. Seventh, Jared Goff, 289.1. Down in eighth, which I think maybe potentially surprises us all, but we might talk about it later, Patrick Mahomes, 280.2 points. In ninth position, CJ Stroud, legend of a rookie, 276 points. 10th position, Baker Mayfield, sneaking back in there, 274.1 points. 11th, Tua, 270.4 points. And in 12th, squeaking in at the end, Trevor Lawrence, 262.5 points. So, which QB in this top 12 list is your biggest surprise?
For me, I can't pick one. There's two. And Paul's going to shake his head because he knows it's Homer, but Jordan Love's up there. But then I can't decide which one is more surprising, either him being a first-year starter jumping up, and you could also throw CJ Stroud into that mix, or Baker Mayfield, who everyone thought his career was kind of dead. We didn't know going into the season whether it was going to be him or Kyle Trask. That's how dead his career was. And then all of a sudden he's a QB 12, going to come back probably next year with Tampa Bay. So I feel like that's a massive surprise that no one is really talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. He was my thoughts, to be honest, Baker. Like, who would have even have thought? I mean, look, if you maybe sit back and think about it, you know, he did have the weapons potentially to do that, you know, Mike Evans, Godwin, etc. But the question was, could he put it all together? We know how terrible he looked at the Panthers. You know, he did okay for a game, you know, at the Rams, but he just was kind of on the scrap heap, wasn't he? And good for him. I'm interested to see if he can maintain that next season, though. I kind of feel like Baker is one of these where, like, oh, I'm great for a season, then all of a sudden I'm going to crash and burn again, and we're back to kind of where we were. What about you, Paul? Who were your biggest surprises?
So to me, there's four names in here that you could pick from any one of them as a surprise. Liam, you've mentioned your love for Love, and Baker Mayfield, and you even mentioned CJ Stroud. I think he's somebody else that you could say is a bit of a shock here. But I've gone for Brock Purdy. I think he kind of shocked everyone. I know it's the system and everything like that, but actually he's done really well, and he surprised a lot of people this year, and I just felt like he needed a mention, you know. So, like I said, there's four people in this top 12, and we could have spoke about any of them right here now. So to me, Brock Purdy was one of the biggest surprises.
Yeah, I have to say, I was very hesitant to draft him this off-season because I wasn't sure what his elbow was going to be like. It wasn't that I didn't think, when he's fitting well, he seems to be able to run this offense very capably. But I was like, will that elbow be good enough for him to play? And obviously, ultimately, it was, and he did really well. But so I missed out there. But I very rarely drafted him, which was a fail for me and something, I guess, for me to learn from. So what about a QB that finished lower than you expected in 2023? So whether that be, kind of lower in the top 12 or they missed out on the top 12 when you were expecting them to be there.
Yeah, so the Burrow, Herbert, Rodgers, the injured ones, they're the quite obvious answers that obviously didn't finish in the top 12 because they got injured partway through the season. And then I've just realised I haven't put this on the show sheet, so I'm sorry, Paul, but I'm taking your answer because it was already planned.
No, you're not stealing my answer. No.
You need a new one.
You're such an on the fence guy. You're like, oh yeah, do you know what? I'll just go with Paul's answer. It's fine.
No, I'd already thought about it. I just completely forgot to put it in the show sheet.
Yeah,
But Pat Mahomes, everyone drafted him to be this high quarterback, and he didn't perform to the level that everyone expected. Just a complete shock for anyone that was taking him as QB1 in either format, dynasty or redraft.
Yeah, it really
Sorry, Paul.
Surprising. Right, Paul, you're going to have to think on the fly now. You can't be saying, oh, well, Liam stole my pick, so I can't say anything.
Right, so I've got a QB that finished lower than expected, yeah?
Yeah.
Deshaun Watson.
Interesting.
Cool.
He was a top 12 pick last year in ADP for a QB position, and he's not even finished in the top 12. And I don't want to talk about him too much because it's Lord Voldemort, and I'm not going to sit here and try and say stuff because Liam stole my answer with Pat Mahomes. So I'm going to talk about Pat Mahomes, and I think Pat Mahomes, ultimately the guy finishes QB8, and we're talking about it as if like it's a massive thing. He still finished as a top 12 QB. You drafted him, I know you drafted him as a top 3, but he's had a down year. He's won the Super Bowl, and it's a shock that he finished 8th. And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be a shock. He still paid back some sort of value to you. It wasn't as if he finished as, like you said, like a Burrow or a Herbert or somebody like that who's nowhere near the top 12. He's finished QB8, and we're still shocked to see him finish that low. So I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem with Pat Mahomes was that he was drafted in the top 2 picks, really, wasn't he? So that's a really high kind of draft capital that you really are taking. So you need him to pay off, and he didn't really. You would have been better taking Hurts over Pat. You would have been better taking. I mean, CMC would be a home run, right? Or something like that. And it's just.
I don't want to be that guy, but you'd have been better taking CMC and not taking any QBs to start with, and drafting Jordan Love and Brock Purdy in like round sort of 6 or 7, and you'd have had QB5 and QB6 on your team, and you could have even taken Jared Goff in a sort of a 3-round streak and gone bam, bam, bam. Thank you very much. I'll have these 3, and you'd have won your league.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the difficulty is that we look at the last season and we say, well, last season the elite quarterbacks, so Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, like significantly outperformed every other QB. So therefore, for me to win my league, I need to have one of these elite players on my team, one of these elite QBs. And if I don't have one, that means that ultimately I won't be able to compete with the teams that have elite QBs. And then ultimately that was kind of then changed this year because obviously Pat Mahomes ended up quite low down. Yes, Josh Allen did finish number 1, but he wasn't, generally these guys, Allen and Hurts, didn't massively outperform everyone. They were kind of still within the pack. So you spent a lot of draft capital because you were thinking about last season where these elite guys must, give me an advantage, and things went back to the mean, I suppose. And so it's a lot easy. It's very easy for us in hindsight to say, "Oh, well, we should have done X, Y, and Z, shouldn't we?" But I do
I'm
think.
so glad that you brought that up. Sorry.
No, go.
So I was going to come on to this later on in the show, but I may as well just shut these out now. When
Go
you
for
were
it, Ian.
talking about looking back at last year and then kind of just copy and pasting for this year and expecting that to be the case, it doesn't happen at many positions. And just looking at quarterback, only 5 quarterbacks came from 2022 to 2023, returned as a QB1 in points per game. And that was Dak and Herbert just missed out on the cut. They were like 13 and 15 or something along those lines. But only 5 QBs return as a QB1. And that was the same again in 2021 to 2022. So going back 2 years and 3 years ago, it's not a common thing for QBs to return. It's kind of like a 50% hit rate. So you kind of, when you look at a top 12, you kind of look at it and go, which of these 6 do I not think are going to come back and I won't draft them? And which 6 do I think will? It's almost like a 50-50 shot of whether they will return as a QB1 and return that value. So it's something very interesting to think about. That 50-50 chance on any QB to return is nuts.
Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting, isn't it? And generally, me personally, when I look back to the year just gone, what I try and do is like, what kind of bigger picture takeaways can I take? So, like, Paul said, actually, we could have taken Jordan Love and Brock Purdy and therefore, won our league by taking CMC. So maybe I can, take more of a shot on these kind of young, unproven QBs. Because ultimately, if I'm going to win, I need my team to outperform everyone else. So if I take a safe pick and he's safe for me, I'm probably not going to win if someone said, right, I'm going to take a shot on Brock Purdy, and they get what he gave us from the draft capital that they took him at. So I think sometimes you just have to be brave and take shots on things and not be kind of in this rigid, I must take a Q, in a Superflex league, I must take one QB within rounds 1 and 2, and then I must take the second by round 4 or 5 or whatever, whatever that might be. Sometimes you just maybe have to be brave and wait a little bit, or pick the guy that everyone else doesn't want to pick because they're improving or whatever. So I think it's nice to kind of sometimes zoom out a bit and not just look at, oh, well, Jared Goff got 289 points, so therefore X, Y, and Z, but just like the more bigger picture stuff, like Patrick Mahomes finished in 8th. So, drafting him as the 102 every single year, you're not always going to get that payoff or, all those kind of things. Anyway, we've zoomed out a bit, which we are planning to do later. So should we zoom back in a little bit and just again have a look at little bits that we were kind of picking out that hopefully will help to guide our general views on the position. So just really quickly, you might say, no, there's no one else, but before we move on, is there anyone aside from the injured QBs, because that's just a cop-out, that you think could enter the top 12? Liam, you said only 5 or 6 of this year's are going to come back and be a QB1. So who are you thinking? I guess we can mention rookies as well, I suppose, but who are you thinking could jump into the top 12 there?
Yeah, I have a feeling one of the rookies, I'm not clued up on the rookies, so I'm not going to throw out names, but I feel like one of them, just like CJ Stroud did this year, I think one of them is going to jump in. You could also look at guys like Kyler Murray, who I'm sorry, Paul, I don't know who you picked on this one. I honestly don't. But Kyler Murray is again a little bit of a cop out answer. So if you picked him, Paul, cop out, absolute cop out. But because he was injured for half of the year, not many people will have thought about him. A name that I'm kind of throwing out there is Justin Fields. I've spoken about him a few times, but if he goes somewhere that really utilizes his legs and he can actually start throwing the ball with a bit more confidence, I feel like that top 12 isn't that far off for him. So if he can get to the right place with the right assets around him, Justin Fields could just jump up and surprise everyone. Kind of like a, I was going to use an example, but Baker doesn't work and nor does Love, etc. So there's not really an example from this year, but I do think he can jump up.
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping that he would be in the top 12 this year. I think obviously a lot of people who drafted him did. And the interesting thing with him, he was either like a top 5 QB, you know, weekly, or he was like a QB3. He was very kind of boom bust, which is great for best ball, but not great for like our redraft leagues, really. Paul, you were going to say Kyler, so I'm not even going to bother coming to you because you're just going to say, oh, he's stolen my pick. I can't think of anything else. All happy, or is there anything else you desperately want to say to us, Paul, before I move on?
No, it's fine. I've looked down the show sheet as well, and I'm sure Liam stole another one of my answers. So you know what I mean. I don't know whether it's a compliment that he's just looking at my answers and going, "Oh yeah, Paul's a really smart guy. I'll write his answers down as well and just say them." You know.
I'll tell you
I feel
Paul,
like what I might
answer.
do, I might just put my answers above him, so you have to come to me first. So he's come on here and copied my answers. No, I think Justin Fields is a great pick. I did put Kyler Murray, and I do get that it's a bit of a cop out because he only actually played half the season. So I suppose you would never expect him to finish as a top 12 QB. But you know, next year you'd like to think that he's one of the people that sneaks into the 6 spots that are going to open up. So yeah,
so that's
QB1 next year.
Probably quite a nice segue, Paul, because now we're going to start looking at some points per game, because as we know, fantasy is actually a weekly game, even though a lot of the time we do talk about season, I suppose fantasy points and season finishes. But really what we want is them to perform on a weekly basis. So let's have a look at the top 12 now in points per game. And it's kind of interesting how things kind of shuffle around a little bit. Now at the top we're the same. Josh Allen number 1, 23.1. Second, Jalen Hurts, 21 points per game. Lamar ends up in third in points per game, 20.7. Dak in fourth, 20.2. Joe Flacco's actually tied with Prescott 2 as well. 18.8. Kirk Cousins, so if he'd have stayed healthy, probably could have been in this top 12. So Liam, you might be right next year. 18.7. Brock Purdy in 8th, 18.5. CJ Stroud in 9th, 18.4. Kyler in 10th, 18.3. Anthony Richardson, 18.2 in 11th. And Justin Herbert in 12th with 18 points per game. So guys, tell me what surprised you about this list, compared to our, I suppose, overall 12 that we talked about earlier.
Well, I was going to be really nice to you and
No,
take this one, and then I'll add some more context on afterwards. But I've just seen one, you've changed your answer in the sheet, so I could just take that.
It wouldn't surprise me, mate. To be honest, it wouldn't surprise me. You take what you want, Liam, okay? Just come here with your little cheese hat and take what you want, okay?
It's taking everything.
I'm going to go with Hannah as my original answer. Sorry, Hannah.
Sorry, I'm just saying that you're stealing everything from Paul and he's getting very upset, Liam. He's not going to invite you back next time.
It's the only reason I got onto the show in the first place. I made everyone else laugh and annoyed Paul. It's the only reason I'm here.
Well,
I'm going to go with Mahomes, though, to answer your question. So he's not on that list. I know we spoke about him having a down year, but there's a few QBs there with not a full season, not even half a season, actually getting into that list. So that's pushed him out. But when you look more into his stats, and I know that we were talking about, you spend a top pick, so if he's returning QB8 value, then that's still okay. It is to an extent, but when you actually look at his points per game over his career, this year was the lowest QB or the lowest points per game that he had over any year he's had as a starter, and not by a small margin, by quite a significant margin. So that's 3 points per game. So his lowest QB or his lowest points per game season was his first year as a starter, where he got 20.28 points per game. This year it was 17. That's quite a large drop. 17 points per game is still good, but it's still quite a large drop from where he has been. I mean, his highest was 24 and a half. So that's still a decent amount. But when you're spending that value to go and get a Mahomes, I feel like the better option is to move off of Mahomes if you've got him in Dynasty, get extra value and go and get a QB that is less value but can still give you some good production there. Paul, I'm gonna let you have your fun now. I know I've stolen your pick, but all yours.
So the question is, are there any surprises on this list? The fact that, Liam, you didn't choose like Joe Flacco is beyond me. You know what I mean? Surely that's the biggest surprise, but it's a cop-out pick. It's a cop-out pick because I get why we talk about fantasy points per game and everything like that, but actually he only played week 13 to 17, and he's finished. I'm trying to find the list. They're fifth overall in fantasy points per game. You know what I mean? And it reality is he won you a championship if you made it to the playoffs because of what he did in them. Like week 16, 32 points, week 17, 25 points. That to me that's a championship winning run, but you had to get to that point to be able to start him there, so I think, Joe Flacco is a bit of a surprise here, but ultimately it's somebody that you didn't play the whole season with, and you didn't make that because let's be honest, nobody drafted him and went week 1, shall I play Joe Flacco? Because I don't think he was actually on a team at that point, was he? So you know what I mean? I think that to me is the biggest surprise in this one. The same as Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson should be a bit of a surprise because I think he only played 5 or 6 weeks, at the start of the season until he went out injured, and he still managed to finish there. So they're big surprises to me. Like I said, I was going to go for Mahomes, but Liam stole that from me. But yeah, so to me, Joe Flacco is the biggest surprise here.
You can't say that Mahomes wasn't on the list, so I didn't answer the question and then go, oh yeah, I was also going to take Mahomes. Paul, you just dropped yourself in it.
I can, and I will. I'll put the show sheet on X. Anyone wants to see the show sheet, I'll put it on X.
Well, usually it's me and Paul fighting, so it's quite fun to watch you two fighting for a change. You're welcome back anytime, Liam. This is great entertainment for me. Yeah, I mean, I just think Joe Flacco is an example where potentially you can pick up a starting QB off waivers. I think historically we've always said, you must draft your QBs. You'll never get anybody from waivers, particularly in the Superflex League. Well, actually, Joe Flacco shows that on occasion there is a guy on waivers that can help you, whether that be for 1 or 2 weeks or whether that be for your entire playoff run. There are still guys there if you go and look for them. And again, I think sometimes you can look to be a bit brave at the quarterback position, and potentially it may pay off. We haven't got too much time left, guys, but I would like to kind of zoom out again one last time and just ask you, what final takeaways do you have from the quarterback position in 2023? And any last thoughts for us, about how we can take what we've learned and how we might apply it in 2024 and beyond. Now, I know, Liam, you kind of brought yours a bit up because we were talking about that before. So, Paul, I'll come to you first, and then Liam, if you've got anything extra you want to add, you're very welcome.
So, my biggest takeaway from this year, and I did kind of touch on this earlier on. My biggest takeaway is like QB2s are really, really valuable. And, it's going back to that Brock Purdy, that Jordan Love, Jared Goff, sort of that conversation again. And I've always sort of kind of undervalued and gone, yeah, I'll pick one of them up eventually and stuff like that. But what I'm going to be looking to do this year is I want to be the guy that's leading that charge. You always want to be the guy that's the start of the run. You always want to be the person going, bosh, I've started this. You take that tight end, and then all of a sudden you see tight end, and you're going, oh, that's amazing. I want to be the guy now that goes, I'm going for my QB2. I want to get, your Jared Goff, your Jordan Love, your Brock Purdy, and I'm not saying all three of them are QB2s. Maybe they sneak in as QB1s. I don't know, but I want to be the person that's leading the charge when it comes to QB2s this year. I think they hold such a big value, and I'm really gonna bark that tree this year. QB2s are where you win your league. Just saying it now. Just saying it now. Also, I want to add something you said a minute ago, Hannah, and I wanted to bring it up. You were saying like people try and leave the draft going, I've drafted my QBs, but you told us earlier 66 different QBs started this year. There's always QBs on waivers. There are always QBs on waivers. So, keep an eye on waivers. QB2s hold value. Pat Mahomes surprised us all.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting. The thing that I find interesting is obviously Liam has said, look, 5 or 6 of these from QB1s from this year are going to be not in the top 12 next year. So my question is, should we be grabbing our Goff, Love and Purdy? Should we now be looking for who are the new guys that might enter the top 12? Because yes, Love, Purdy and Goff may well stay in the top 12 this season, but they've also got a 50-50 chance of falling out. So should we be targeting those guys this year, or should we be trying to pick out, okay, who could the new guys be that join them, and maybe I'll get them a bit cheaper, but they end up in the top 12 anyway. Interesting conversation for us to continue. We've plenty of off-season to go, haven't we? Liam, any final thoughts before we leave?
No, just exactly what you've said there. Just I'm going to be targeting my QB2s and those high upside QB2s a little bit more this season. And if we look at Dynasty a little bit more, probably taking more QBs that you don't ever expect to actually hit the field, because as you said, 66 and 68 in the past 2 seasons have started a game. Especially in Dynasty, if they start a game, they increase in value. Get rid of them for a third or a fourth. That's maybe some profit that you can then spin elsewhere. So, all backup QBs on Dynasty rosters, I think. Yeah.
I always like in Superflex Dynasty leagues having, quite a few QBs because they're quite good. I suppose you typically have keep good sale value, most of them anyway. I've got Bryce Young on one at the moment, so I'm waiting for him to actually do something, and I'm hoping that maybe I can get some value out of him at some point. Liam, thank you so much for joining us. We've loved having you. Hats off for keeping the cheese on your head for the whole time. Please just quickly let everyone know where they can find you and then potentially come and chat football with you.
Yeah, I don't do podcasting or anything anymore, but if you ever just want to chat, head over to @the tweets on Twitter, X. I don't really use it anymore, but if you would like to chat, then just drop me a message or tweet. And if you just want to see me and Paul argue, just drop something and tag us both and we'll figure out a way.
Now that sounds fun. I'm going to be DMing both of you and dropping all sorts on X just to see you two argue. It sounds great. So that brings us to the end of the show. Again, thanks so much for joining us, Liam. I think there's some great takeaways there that we can start to look at and put kind of forward for 2024. Obviously, thank you for everyone for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on X @Wildcard Rewind. And of course, you can catch our beautiful faces and Liam's cheesehead at our YouTube channel. Just search for the Fantasy Wildcard. And again, we would love for you to subscribe. Otherwise, we'll continue with our positional reviews next week, and we'll see you all then.
Take me back to the start.